The house smells like cinnamon and pine when I walk through the front door, carrying my contribution to Christmas dinner, a green bean casserole that's honestly nothing special. But Mom always insists everyone bring something, even though she cooks enough food to feed half the neighborhood. The familiar warmth hits me immediately, not just from the heat, but from being back in the house where I grew up, where every corner holds memories of Christmas mornings and birthday parties and ordinary Tuesday nights doing homework at the kitchen table. Mom's already in full hostess mode, bustling around the dining room, adjusting the red tablecloth for the third time and rearranging the centerpiece she made herself with holly and white candles. The good china is out, the set that belonged to Grandma Eleanor before she passed last month. And seeing those delicate plates with their tiny blue flowers makes my chest tight with missing her. She would have loved this gathering, would have been sitting in her favorite chair by now, telling stories about Christmases when Dad was little. "Emma, honey, can you help me with the napkins?" Mom calls out, and I can hear the slight edge in her voice that always appears when she's trying to make everything perfect. "They need to go under the forks, not next to them. You know how your grandmother always did it?" I smile, despite the sadness. "Of course, Mom," and start refolding the deep red napkins the way Grandma taught me when I was 8 years old, back when my biggest worry was whether Santa would remember to bring the dollhouse I had been wanting for months. Dad emerges from the kitchen carrying a platter of sliced ham, looking relaxed in his favorite Christmas sweater, the one with the reindeer that Mom pretends to hate but secretly loves. "Smells amazing in here, Linda," he says, dropping a kiss on Mom's cheek, and she actually blushes. After 28 years of marriage, they still have moments like this that make me believe in lasting love, even though my own dating life has been a series of disappointments lately. "Rachel and Mark should be here soon." Just hearing Rachel's name makes my stomach do a little flip. Not because I don't love my sister, but because she has this way of taking up all the oxygen in a room, making everyone else feel smaller somehow. She's 3 years older than me, and sometimes I still feel like the little sister, trailing behind, trying to keep up, trying to be good enough to earn the attention that comes so naturally to her. "I hope Rachel's in a good mood today," Mom says under her breath, and I pretend not to hear it, but we're all thinking the same thing. Rachel's been different lately, more sharp-edged than usual ever since she and Mark started having problems with their finances. His consulting business hasn't been doing well, and Rachel has been stressed about money in a way that makes family gatherings feel like walking through a minefield. The front door opens with a bang, and Rachel's voice carries through the house. "Sorry we're late. Traffic was absolutely insane, and Mark refused to take the shortcut through downtown because, God forbid, we saved 10 minutes. Her heels click against the hardwood floor, and she appears in the doorway looking perfectly put together as always, in a red dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, her blonde hair styled in perfect waves, and her makeup flawless despite claiming to be stressed about traffic. Mark follows behind her, looking slightly rumpled and tired, carrying a bottle of wine and what looks like store-bought cookies, still in the plastic container. "Sorry, Linda, the bakery was closed, so we had to grab these from the grocery store," he says with an apologetic smile that makes me feel sorry for him. Sometimes I wonder what drew Rachel to him when they first met, because lately she treats him more like an employee than a husband. "Don't worry about it, Mark. These look delicious," Mom says, taking the cookies and bustling toward the kitchen, but I catch the look she exchanges with Dad, the one that says, "Here we go again." Rachel surveys the dining room with critical eyes. "This looks nice, Mom. Very traditional." There's something in her tone that makes traditional sound like an insult, but Mom either doesn't notice or chooses to ignore it. "Where's the good silverware? The set Grandma left you." "This is the good silverware, Rachel. Grandma left the china, not the silverware, remember?" "Right, of course," Rachel says, but her eyes narrow slightly, and I can almost see the wheels turning in her head, calculating and comparing like she always does when it comes to what Grandma left to whom. The inheritance has been a sore subject ever since the funeral when Grandma's lawyer mentioned there would be a formal reading of the will after the holidays. We settle around the table, and Dad says grace, the way he has every Christmas for as long as I can remember, thanking God for family and food and the blessings of the year. While I close my eyes and try to center myself in this moment, surrounded by the people I love most, even when they drive me crazy. The ham is perfect, and Mom's stuffing is the same recipe she's used since I was a little girl. And for a few minutes, it almost feels normal, Almost feels like the Christmases from before, when Grandma was still here, when Rachel and I used to fight over who got to sit next to her. But then Rachel starts talking about their vacation plans for next year, some expensive trip to Europe that Mark clearly doesn't look excited about, and she mentions needing to be more careful with money in a way that sounds accusatory, and I can feel the tension creeping back into the room like a cold draft under the door. Mom keeps trying to change the subject to neutral topics like the weather and local news, but Rachel keeps steering things back to complaints about money, about their house needing repairs, about how unfair everything is. It's just frustrating, Rachel says, taking a large sip of wine, when you work so hard and feel like you're always behind while other people seem to have everything handed to them. I feel my cheeks heat up because even though she's not looking at me directly, I know that comment is aimed my way. It always comes back to this somehow, the idea that my life is easier than hers, even though I'm a teacher living in a tiny apartment driving a car that's older than some of my students, while she lives in a beautiful house in the best part of town. Mark clears his throat uncomfortably. "The ham is really good, Linda. Thanks for having us." Mom smiles gratefully at him, but I can see the worry lines around her eyes deepening. She hates conflict more than anything, which is probably why she tries so hard to keep things perfect, to make everyone happy. But some things can't be smoothed over with good food and holiday decorations. Some tensions run too deep to be covered up with red tablecloths and Christmas music playing softly in the background. The moment happens so fast, I almost miss it. 1 second, we're discussing Mom's plans for redecorating the guest room, and the next, Rachel is setting down her wine glass with a sharp clink against her plate and looking directly at me with something dangerous glittering in her eyes, something that makes my stomach drop before she even opens her mouth. "You know what? I think it's time we stopped pretending," Rachel says, and her voice has that particular tone she gets when she's about to say something she knows will hurt. The tone she used when we were kids and she'd tell me Santa wasn't real or that my favorite dress made me look fat. Emma's been sitting there all evening acting like she belongs here, like she's really part of this family, when we all know the truth. The words hit the air like a physical blow, and suddenly the warm Christmas atmosphere feels brittle, fragile, like glass about to shatter. Mom's fork clatters against her plate, and Dad goes completely still in that way he does when he's trying not to lose his temper. Mark looks confused, glancing between Rachel and me like he's trying to solve a puzzle he doesn't have all the pieces for. "Rachel!" Dad's voice is low and warning, but she's not stopping. She's been building up to this moment, and now that she's started, there's no going back. She's adopted, David. Everyone knows it. So why are we still playing pretend? Rachel's voice gets louder, more confident, like she's feeding off the shock in the room. Emma isn't even really part of this family. She's just some stray that Grandma took in, and now she gets to sit here and act like she has the same claim to everything the rest of us do. The room spins around me, and I feel like I'm watching this happen to someone else, like I'm floating above the table looking down at this family that suddenly feels foreign and strange. My hands are shaking, and I can't seem to get enough air into my lungs. Adopted? The word echoes in my head, bouncing around like a pinball, hitting every memory, every moment of belonging I thought I had. That's enough. Mom's voice breaks on the words, and when I look at her, she's crying. Actual tears streaming down her cheeks, smearing her mascara, and making her look older, smaller somehow. "Rachel, how could you?" But Rachel isn't done. She's leaning forward now, energized by the chaos she's created. "Oh, please, Mom, don't act like this is some big secret. We've all been tiptoeing around it for years, while Emma gets treated like the precious baby of the family when she's not even blood." Not even blood. The phrase hits me like a slap, and suddenly, so many things make sense. All those times I felt slightly out of step with the family rhythm. All those moments when I caught Mom and Dad exchanging looks I couldn't interpret. All those occasions when relatives would comment on how different I looked from everyone else, with my dark hair and green eyes, when everyone else had the Carter blonde hair and blue eyes. "Is it true?" I whisper, and my voice sounds strange and far away, like it's coming from someone else's throat. "Am I adopted?" The silence that follows is deafening. Even the Christmas music seems to have stopped playing, and all I can hear is the sound of my own heartbeat thundering in my ears.
Mom is sobbing quietly now, and Dad looks like he's aged 10 years in the past 30 seconds, his face gray and stricken. Emma, sweetie, Mom starts, but her voice is so thick with tears I can barely understand her. We were going to tell you, we just wanted to wait for the right time. The right time after 26 years of my life? The right time after letting me believe I belonged here? Letting me build my entire identity around being the Carter, around being their daughter, their sister? Rachel's sister, even though she's sitting there looking triumphant, like she just won some twisted game I didn't even know we were playing? How long? I managed to ask, though speaking feels like trying to swallow broken glass. How long have you known? Since the beginning, Dad says quietly, and his admission hits me like another blow. You came to us when you were just a baby, Emma. Your birth mother couldn't take care of you, and Mom and Grandma, they thought it would be better if you grew up thinking you were ours from the start. Ours from the start? But I wasn't, was I? I was someone else's first, someone else's mistake or tragedy or moment of desperation, and they just decided to paper over that truth with birthday parties and bedtime stories and 26 years of lies. Rachel is watching all of this with satisfaction written across her face, like she's enjoying every second of my humiliation, every tear that's starting to slip down my cheeks despite my best efforts to hold them back. Mark looks sick, though, pale and uncomfortable in a way that makes me think maybe he didn't know about this plan. Maybe this is just Rachel being cruel in the way only she can.
I can't, I push back from the table, standing on legs that feel unsteady. I can't do this right now. Emma, please. Mom reaches for me, but I step away from her touch because right now I can't bear to be comforted by someone who lied to me my entire life. We love you so much, sweetheart. You're our daughter in every way that matters. But if I'm their daughter in every way that matters, then why did they lie? Why did they let me grow up thinking I was something I'm not? Why did they let Rachel sit on this secret like ammunition waiting for the perfect moment to destroy me with it? Every way that matters except the truth, I say, and my voice is steadier now, filled with a hurt so deep it feels like it might swallow me whole. Except honesty, except treating me like I deserve to know who I really am. I grab my coat from the back of my chair, ignoring Mom's pleas for me to stay, ignoring Dad's promises that we can work this out, ignoring everything except the need to get away from this house that suddenly feels like a stage set where I've been playing a role I never auditioned for. By the way, Rachel calls out as I'm walking toward the door, and there's something almost cheerful in her voice now. Grandma's will reading is tomorrow morning, 10 sharp at Daniel's office. I'm sure that'll be very interesting for everyone involved. The threat in her words is unmistakable, and as I walk out into the cold December night, I can't help but wonder what other secrets are waiting to destroy what's left of the life I thought I knew. I drive around for 2 hours before going home, taking random turns through neighborhoods I barely recognize while my mind spins in circles trying to process what just happened. The radio plays Christmas songs that now sound mocking and false. Deck the halls with boughs of holly, fa la 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 la. But there's nothing jolly about finding out your entire life has been built on a lie. My apartment feels different when I finally walk through the door, smaller and more hollow, like coming home to a place that isn't really yours anymore, which I guess in a way it never was. If Emma Carter isn't who I really am, then who is this person living in this tiny one-bedroom, struggling to pay rent on a teacher's salary? Who are my real parents, and why couldn't they keep me? What was so wrong with me that I needed to be given away like an unwanted Christmas present? I sink onto my couch, still wearing my Christmas dress, and stare at the small tree I put up last week when I was still blissfully ignorant about my identity. It's decorated with ornaments I've collected over the years, little reminders of Christmas past and family traditions that now feel like lies told by actors in a play I didn't know I was watching. My phone buzzes with a text from Mom. Please come back so we can talk about this properly. We love you so much, Emma. You'll always be our daughter. But the thing is, if they really loved me, wouldn't they have told me the truth?
Wouldn't they have trusted me with my own story instead of letting Rachel weaponize it against me? And how many other people knew? How many family gatherings have I attended where everyone was in on the secret except me? How many times have I talked about inherited traits or family resemblances while people just smiled and nodded along with my ignorance? Another text, this time from Dad. What Rachel did was wrong, but please don't let her cruelty overshadow how much you mean to us. What Rachel did was wrong, but she didn't create the situation. She just exposed it, like pulling back a curtain to reveal the machinery behind the magic trick. The real wrong was done 26 years ago when two people who claimed to love me decided I couldn't handle the truth about my own existence. I try to remember if there were signs, if there were moments when the facade slipped, but all I can think of are the times I felt slightly out of place at family gatherings, the way conversations would sometimes stop when I entered the room, the way Grandma would look at me with an expression I could never quite read, something tender and sad and protective all at once. Grandma, who apparently knew the truth from the beginning, Grandma, who took me in, according to Dad, which means she was probably my real grandmother, or at least knew my real family, and now she's gone, taking her secrets with her, leaving behind only a will that Rachel seems to think contains more explosive revelations. I pull out my laptop and open a new browser window. Before I can talk myself out of it, typing, "How to find birth parents, adoption records," into the search bar. My hands are shaking as I read through websites full of advice for adult adoptees searching for their biological families. Terms like non-identifying information and reunion registries that feel foreign and clinical, like medical procedures, rather than the emotional earthquake of discovering your life is not what you thought it was. The more I read, the angrier I get. Not just at Mom and Dad for lying, but at myself for never questioning anything, for accepting the story of my life without examination. I think about all the times people said I was so different from the rest of the family, and I just laughed it off, proud to be unique, instead of wondering why I didn't inherit the Carter family's love of spicy food or their ability to tan in the summer instead of burning. Around midnight, my phone rings, and it's Rachel's number, which surprises me because I was expecting more apologetic texts from Mom and Dad, not contact from the person who destroyed my world a few hours ago. "What do you want, Rachel?" I answer, without any greeting.
"I want to talk," she says, and her voice sounds different now, less triumphant, more tired. "Can I come over?" "Absolutely not." "Emma, please, I know you're angry, but there are things you need to know before tomorrow's will reading. Things that might help you understand Why you what? Humiliated me in front of our parents? Destroyed Christmas? Ruined my entire sense of identity? For what, Rachel? What could possibly justify that?" There's a long pause, and when she speaks again, her voice is quieter, almost vulnerable. "Because I've been living with this secret my whole life. Watching Mom and Dad treat you like you're special when you're not even really their daughter. Watching Grandma dote on you when she barely paid attention to me, her actual granddaughter. And now with the inheritance, what about the inheritance? That's what I'm trying to tell you, Emma. There are things in Grandma's will that you don't know about. Things that make tonight look like a minor family squabble. You need to be prepared for what's coming tomorrow." My blood runs cold because Rachel's voice has shifted again. Now she sounds almost scared. And Rachel is never scared. She's the one who faces down aggressive parents at Mark's business events, who argues with contractors and demands refunds from department stores. What could be in Grandma's will that would frighten someone like her? "Tell me now," I demand. "If you're so concerned about preparing me, then explain what you mean." "Not over the phone," Rachel says. "This is too important and too complicated for a phone conversation. Let me come over, Emma. Please, I know I hurt you tonight, but there's more at stake here than just family drama." The line goes quiet, and I realize she's hung up, leaving me with more questions than answers and a growing dread about what tomorrow morning might bring. If Rachel is scared of what's in Grandma's will, then it must be something that threatens her somehow. Something that changes the family dynamic in ways I can't even imagine. I look around my small apartment at the life I've built as Emma Carter, teacher, daughter, sister, and wonder if any of it will still be true after tomorrow. If the will reading will strip away even more of my identity, or if it might finally give me some answers about who I really am and why my birth parents gave me up, and whether the people I've called mom and dad for 26 years will still want me in their lives once all the secrets are finally exposed. The Christmas tree lights blur through my tears as I finally let myself cry, not just for the revelation about my adoption, but for the loss of this simple, uncomplicated love I thought my family shared, for the trust that's been shattered, and for the fear of what other truths might be waiting to destroy what's left of everything I thought I knew about myself. Sleep doesn't come, even though I've been lying here for hours, staring at the ceiling while my mind races through every family memory, trying to decode what was real and what was performance. The digital clock on my nightstand glows 3:47 a.m., and all I can think about is how many times I've heard the phrase, blood is thicker than water. But what happens when you discover you don't share blood with the people you thought were your family? What happens when water is all you've ever known? I finally give up on sleep and pad to the living room where I keep photo albums in a basket under the coffee table. Albums Mom helped me organize last year when I was going through a nostalgic phase, wanting to preserve family memories that now feel like evidence in a crime I never knew was being committed against me. The first album contains baby pictures, and I study them with new eyes, looking for clues I missed before. There I am as a newborn, but something's off about the hospital photos. Mom looks tired in a different way than new mothers usually do. Not exhausted from labor, but emotionally drained, like she's been through something difficult that had nothing to do with giving birth. And Dad's smile seems forced, strained around the edges. I flip through pages of my first year, looking for the moment when the live began, but it's impossible to pinpoint because they were there from the very beginning, woven into every birthday party, every family vacation, every ordinary Tuesday when Mom packed my lunch and Dad helped with homework. They built an entire false life around me, brick by brick, day by day, until the foundation felt solid enough to stand on. My phone buzzes, and I jump, thinking it might be Rachel calling back with more devastating revelations. But it's my best friend Maya texting from her night shift at the hospital. "Hey girl, working late and thinking about you. Hope Christmas dinner wasn't too awful with the family drama." Maya doesn't know about tonight's explosion yet, and for a moment, I consider not telling her, keeping this secret the way my family kept secrets from me. But then I realized that's exactly the kind of thinking that got us into this mess in the first place. The belief that lies are kinder than truth, that ignorance is protection. I text back, "Huge thing happened tonight. Rachel told me I'm adopted, and apparently everyone knew except me. Can you talk when you get off work?" Her response comes immediately. "What the hell, Emma? Are you okay? Do you need me to come over right now?" The concern in her message makes me cry again, because this is what real love looks like. Not the careful, orchestrated performance my family has been putting on for 26 years, but honest, immediate support without conditions or secrets attached. "No, I'm okay. Well, not okay, but safe. Just processing. Everything will call you tomorrow after the will reading." Will reading? What's happening tomorrow? Long story, but Grandma's will is being read, and Rachel hinted there might be more surprises waiting for me. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry this is happening. Sending you all my love, and remember, families are built on more than biology. You're still the same amazing person you were yesterday." Her words help more than she knows, because she's right. I am still the same person who teaches third grade and volunteers at the animal shelter and makes terrible jokes that only Maya laughs at. The revelation about my adoption doesn't change my personality or my values or the relationships I've built outside my family. It just changes the story I've been telling myself about where I came from. I close the photo albums and make myself a cup of tea, sitting by the window, watching the empty street while snow begins to fall, like the world is getting a fresh start, a clean slate. Maybe that's what tomorrow will bring. Not more devastation, but clarity. Maybe Grandma's will contains answers instead of just more questions. Maybe she left behind an explanation that will help me understand not just where I came from, but why the truth was hidden for so long. The snow keeps falling, And gradually, the neighborhood transforms into something peaceful and new, covering all the familiar landmarks with a layer of white that makes everything look different, but not necessarily worse, just changed. And maybe that's what I need to accept about my life, that change doesn't always mean destruction. Sometimes it just means seeing things as they really are, instead of as we've been pretending them to be. Daniel Morrison's law office feels like a funeral parlor, all dark wood and heavy curtains designed to make you speak in whispers and contemplate mortality, which seems appropriate given that we're here to divide up the possessions of someone who can no longer speak for herself. The receptionist leads us to a conference room where we sit around a polished table that reflects our faces like a mirror, showing us back to ourselves in this moment of reckoning. Mom and Dad arrive first, looking like they've aged years overnight. Mom's eyes are puffy from crying, and Dad keeps checking his phone like he's hoping for an emergency that will let him escape this confrontation. Rachel sweeps in, 10 minutes late, wearing a black suit that makes her look like she's attending a business meeting rather than a family gathering. Mark trails behind her, looking increasingly uncomfortable with each passing day of being married to someone whose capacity for cruelty seems to have no bottom. "Good morning, everyone," Daniel says, settling into his chair with the thick folder that contains Grandma's final wishes. "I know this has been a difficult time for your family, and I want you to know that Eleanor thought very carefully about how to handle her estate. The way he says your family makes me wonder if he knows about last night's revelation, if Grandma confided in him about the adoption secret, or if he's just being professionally diplomatic. But there's something in his expression when he looks at me that suggests he knows more than he's letting on." Before we begin with the formal reading, I want to remind everyone that Eleanor's instructions were very specific about how this process should unfold. She requested that certain portions of the will be read in a particular order and that everyone remain present until the entire document has been reviewed. Rachel shifts impatiently in her chair. "Can we just get on with it, Daniel? Some of us have other obligations today." Mark shoots her a warning look, but she ignores him, focused entirely on what she clearly believes will be her financial vindication for years of feeling overlooked and undervalued by Grandma. The way she's sitting forward in her chair reminds me of a predator preparing to pounce, and I can't help but wonder what she thinks she knows about the contents of this will that makes her so confident. "Of course," Daniel says smoothly. "Let's begin with the preliminary distributions. The jewelry collection will be divided between Linda and Rachel, with the exception of the pearl necklace, which goes to Emma as specifically requested." I touch my throat involuntarily, remembering how Grandma used to let me try on that necklace when I was little, telling me that it would be mine someday because it brought out my eyes the same way it brought out hers. But now I wonder if there was more meaning in that promise, if she was trying to tell me something about our connection that she couldn't say directly. The china set goes to Linda, the books and photograph collections to David, and the furniture will be distributed according to the attached list. However, there is a special section of the will that Eleanor requested be read separately. The temperature in the room seems to drop several degrees, and I notice that Rachel's confident expression falters slightly as Daniel pulls out a sealed envelope from the folder. "This letter is addressed specifically to Emma," he says, and every eye in the room turns to me. Eleanor requested that it be read aloud to the entire family before we proceed with the remaining portions of the will. My mouth goes dry, because whatever is in that letter was important enough for Grandma to orchestrate this moment to ensure that everyone would be present to hear it together. And Rachel's reaction last night about secrets and inheritance, I have a feeling this letter is going to explain more than just why I get the pearl necklace. Daniel carefully opens the envelope and unfolds what appears to be several pages of Grandma's familiar handwriting, the same careful script she used for birthday cards and grocery lists, now containing the words that might finally explain the mystery of my existence. "My dearest Emma," he begins reading, and just hearing Grandma's voice through his words makes tears spring to my eyes. "If you are hearing this letter, then the time has finally come to tell you the truth about your story and why your parents and I made the choices we did 26 years ago." Daniel's voice takes on the cadence of Grandma's speaking pattern as he continues reading, and for a moment, it's like she's in the room with us, one last time, sharing the secrets she carried to her grave. Your biological mother was my sister Margaret's daughter Sarah, who found herself pregnant at 17 with nowhere to turn. Margaret had already passed away, and Sarah was living with a boyfriend who wanted nothing to do with a baby. Your father was a boy from her high school who disappeared the moment he learned about the pregnancy, leaving Sarah alone and terrified. The room is completely silent, except for the sound of Daniel's voice and my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. So my birth mother was Grandma's great-niece, which means Grandma really was my family, just not in the way I always thought. And Sarah? She was just a scared teenager who couldn't handle raising a child alone? Sarah came to me when she was 7 months pregnant, begging for help. She wanted to place you for adoption, but she was terrified of giving you to strangers, of never knowing if you were safe and loved. So I made her a promise that changed all our lives. I told her that David and Linda would raise you as their own, that you would grow up knowing you were cherished, but that we would keep your adoption private to protect you from feeling different or unwanted. Mom starts crying again. Soft, hiccuping sobs that make Dad reach over and squeeze her hand. And I realize this letter isn't just explaining my story, it's defending the choices they made, validating the decision to keep the truth hidden for so long. Sarah visited you exactly once, when you were 6 months old, and held you for 2 hours while you slept. She kissed your forehead and told me she knew she had made the right choice because she could see how much David and Linda already loved you. She moved to California the next month, and we never heard from her again. But every year on your birthday, she sent a card to my address with no return address, just her signature, and the words, "Thank you for keeping our promise." Our promise, the words hit me like a physical blow, because it means Grandma wasn't just keeping a secret. She was honoring a commitment to my birth mother, protecting both of us in the only way she knew how. And suddenly, the weight of carrying this secret for 26 years seems overwhelming rather than cruel. Emma, my darling girl, you were never unwanted or unloved. You were the answer to prayers for 2 families. The daughter Sarah couldn't keep but needed to know was safe, and the child David and Linda had been hoping for but couldn't have naturally. You are not an outsider in this family. You are the bridge between past and present, the living proof that love is stronger than biology. Rachel's face has gone completely white, and Mark is staring at her with something that looks like disgust as the full scope of her cruelty becomes clear. She didn't just reveal a family secret. She attacked someone who had been through enough loss and abandonment for one lifetime. As for the inheritance, Daniel continues reading, I am leaving the house and the trust fund to Emma, not because she needs them more than my other grandchildren, but because they belong to Sarah's mother, Margaret, and they should stay in that branch of the family. Emma, you are not getting these things as charity or out of pity. You are getting them because they are rightfully yours, by blood and by love. The silence that follows is deafening, and I can see Rachel processing the fact that her years of resentment were based on a fundamental misunderstanding, that the grandmother she thought favored an outsider was actually ensuring that family property stayed with family, just not the family Rachel thought she belonged to. There is one final thing, Daniel says, folding the letter carefully. Eleanor wanted me to give this to Emma personally. He reaches into the folder and pulls out a small jewelry box which he slides across the table to me. With shaking hands, I open it to find a simple gold locket, and inside, there's a tiny photograph of a young woman who looks remarkably like me. The same dark hair and green eyes, the same stubborn chin. That's Sarah, your birth mother, Daniel explains gently. Eleanor saved this for you in case you ever wanted to know what she looked like. I stare at the photograph, feeling a strange sense of completion, like a puzzle piece I didn't know was missing has finally clicked into place. And while there's still sadness about the secrets and lies, there's also relief in finally understanding the truth about where I came from and why the people who raised me made the choices they did. Rachel stands abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. This is ridiculous! Margaret was barely related to us. She was Grandma's half-sister. They hardly spoke.
Blood is blood, Rachel, Dad says quietly, and his voice carries a warning. And Emma is family, no matter how much you want to pretend otherwise.
For the first time since this nightmare began, I feel something other than betrayal and confusion. I feel the beginning of peace, with the knowledge that my story isn't one of abandonment, but of love so fierce it survived decades of secrecy and sacrifice. The letter is still sitting in front of me, like a bridge between my old life and whatever comes next. When Daniel clears his throat and opens another section of the will folder, his expression carefully neutral in that way lawyers perfect when they're about to deliver news that will change everything. Now we come to the primary inheritance distributions, he says, adjusting his glasses. And I can feel Rachel leaning forward again, her confidence returning now that we're talking about actual money. The house at 842 Maple Street, along with all contents and the associated trust fund established by Margaret Carter, will go to Emma Carter as the sole heir of the Margaret Carter family line. The words hit the room like a bomb going off, and for a moment, nobody moves. Nobody speaks. Nobody even seems to breathe. The house is worth at least $400,000, and the trust fund, I had no idea there even was a trust fund, but Rachel's face tells me it's substantial enough to matter, substantially enough to make her go completely pale before her face flushes red with rage. "That's impossible!" Rachel says, standing so quickly her chair tips backward. "Emma can't inherit Grandma's house. She's not even a real Carter. She's some stranger's kid that Grandma felt sorry for." "Rachel, please," Mom starts, but Rachel whirls on her with fury that's been building for years, maybe decades. "Don't Rachel please me, Linda. You've been enabling the charade for 26 years, treating her like she's special when she's nothing but a charity case. And now she gets Grandma's house, the house that should have gone to actual family members who've been loyal and present and deserving." The word deserving hits me like a slap because it reveals so much about how Rachel sees the world as a competition where love and inheritance are prizes to be won rather than gifts to be given freely. But Daniel's voice cuts through her tirade, calm and professional. "The will is quite clear, Rachel. Eleanor's instructions state that since Emma is Margaret's great-granddaughter, the property should return to that family line as Margaret originally intended before her death. The trust fund was actually established by Margaret herself, with instructions that it should go to her descendants." Rachel's mouth opens and closes like she's trying to speak but can't find words, while Mark looks increasingly uncomfortable, like he's finally seeing his wife clearly for the first time and doesn't like what he's discovering. "This is ridiculous," Rachel finally manages. "Margaret was barely family. She was Grandma's half-sister from her father's second marriage. They didn't even talk for the last 10 years of Margaret's life." Nevertheless, Daniel continues, the legal documentation is very clear. Emma is Margaret's sole surviving heir and, as such, inherits both the property and the financial assets that Margaret left in Eleanor's care. I feel like I'm floating outside my body watching this happen to someone else, because how did I go from learning I was adopted yesterday to inheriting a house and trust fund today? It's too much to process, too many life-changing revelations packed into 24 hours. And all I can think about is how Grandma must have planned this moment, knowing that Rachel would be furious, knowing that the truth about my adoption would come out eventually, and wanting to make sure I understood that my place in this family was never contingent on charity or pity. "How much?" Rachel demands. "How much is the trust fund worth?" Daniel hesitates, clearly uncomfortable with the question, but then says, "Approximately $800,000 plus the accumulated interest from the past 32 years. The number hangs in the air like a physical thing, and I watch Rachel's face cycle through emotions: disbelief, rage,
jealousy and something that looks almost like hatred, directed entirely at me, as if I somehow orchestrated this, as if I knew about any of this before yesterday's devastating dinner. "This is insane," Mark says, quietly, and for a moment I think he's going to support his wife, but then he continues, "Rachel, how can you be angry at Emma for inheriting money from her own great-great-grandmother? Money that was never yours to begin with." Rachel turns on him with the same fury she's been directing at me. "Don't you dare take her side, Mark. We've been struggling financially while she's been playing the poor little teacher, and now it turns out she's secretly rich?" "She didn't know," Mark says, and his voice is getting louder. "None of us knew about the trust fund, and you're acting like she manipulated an elderly woman into changing her will, when the truth is you've been resenting her for getting attention that you thought you deserved." The fight between them is happening right in front of us, and I can see years of marital tension finally erupting as Mark realizes that his wife's jealousy of me has been poisoning their relationship, affecting every family gathering, every conversation about money, every moment when Rachel felt overlooked or undervalued. "Emma," Daniel says gently, drawing my attention back to him, "do you have any questions about the inheritance or your grandmother's instructions?"
I look around the room at my parents, who are watching me with expressions of hope and fear, at Rachel, who looks like she wants to physically attack someone, and at Mark, who seems to be questioning every choice he's made in the past 5 years. "I need some time to think about all of this," I say, and my voice sounds steadier than I feel. This is a lot to process. But even as I say it, I know that Rachel isn't going to give me time to process anything peacefully. She's going to fight this inheritance with everything she has, and tomorrow's family gathering just became a war zone. We're barely out of the lawyer's office when Rachel grabs my arm with enough force to leave bruises, her perfectly manicured nails digging into my skin as she drags me toward the parking garage, away from Mom and Dad, who are trying to give me space to process everything that just happened. "We need to talk," she hisses, and there's something in her voice I've never heard before. Something raw and desperate that makes me realize this inheritance isn't just about money for her. It's about validation, about proving she was right to resent me all these years. "Let go of me, Rachel," I say, trying to pull away, but her grip tightens. "Not until you listen to what I have to say," she says, positioning herself between me and the exit like she's afraid I might run. "You think you've won something today, but you have no idea what you've cost this family, what you've cost me." Mark appears behind her, looking exhausted and ashamed. "Rachel, that's enough. You're making a scene." "I don't care who sees this," Rachel snaps without turning around. "I'm done pretending everything is fine when it's not fine, when it's never been fine since the day they brought her home and started treating her like she was more important than their actual daughter." The words pour out of her like poison that's been building up for decades. And I finally understand that this isn't just about Grandma's will or tonight's revelation about my adoption. It's about every birthday party where I got attention, every Christmas morning where Grandma made a fuss over me, every family dinner where I was included in conversations that Rachel felt excluded from. "You want to know the truth, Emma?" Rachel continues, and her voice is getting louder, attracting stares from other people leaving the building. "I've hated you since the day you arrived, when I was 3 years old, and suddenly I wasn't special anymore. Suddenly everything was about the baby and how precious she was and how lucky we were to have her." "Rachel, please," Mark tries to intervene, but she pushes him away. "No, Mark, she needs to hear this," Rachel says, and now she's crying angry tears that streak her makeup and make her look wild, desperate. "I spent my entire childhood competing with someone who wasn't even supposed to be there, watching my parents fawn over their adopted daughter while their real daughter got overlooked, ignored, treated like she was somehow less important." The truth of it hits me like a physical blow, because I can see in her face that she really believes this, that she spent 26 years convinced that my presence in the family diminished her worth somehow, stole love that should have been exclusively hers.
And Grandma was the worst, always taking your side, always making excuses for you, always treating you like you were something special when you were just a reminder of her dead half-sister's mistakes. That's enough, Mark says, and his voice has changed, become cold and disgusted. Rachel, you're talking about your sister. She's not my sister, Rachel screams, and the sound echoes through the parking garage. She's a stranger who stole my family, and now she's stealing my inheritance, money that should have gone to actual Carter descendants, not some unwanted kid that nobody else wanted. The cruelty in her words is breathtaking, and I can see Mark finally understanding who he married, finally seeing the depth of resentment and jealousy that Rachel has been carrying around like a weapon waiting for the right moment to use it. How long, Mark asks quietly, how long have you felt this way about Emma? Forever, Rachel says defiantly, and if you think I'm going to stand by and watch her waltz off with $800,000 that should rightfully be mine, then you don't know me at all. Mark stares at her for a long moment, then shakes his head. You're right, I don't know you at all, because the woman I married wouldn't be cruel enough to attack someone for circumstances beyond their control, wouldn't be jealous enough to resent a child for being loved. Don't you dare lecture me about this, Mark. Rachel turns her fury on him. You've been just as resentful about their finances as I have, just as frustrated that we're struggling while they get to play happy family with their charity case daughter. But Mark is already walking away, shaking his head and muttering something about needing to reevaluate everything. And Rachel watches him go with an expression that suggests she's just realized she might have pushed too far, revealed too much, shown him a side of herself that he can't forgive or forget. This isn't over, Emma, Rachel says, turning back to me with desperation replacing the anger. I'm going to contest that will. I'm going to prove that Grandma wasn't competent when she made those decisions, that you manipulated her somehow.
But we both know she's grasping at straws, that there's no evidence of manipulation or incompetence, just a bitter woman who can't accept that love was never a finite resource that needed to be rationed between competing children. I watch her walk away alone in the parking garage, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I feel something other than pain. I feel free. The drive home from the lawyer's office feels different this time. Not like fleeing from devastating news, but like traveling towards something new, something that belongs to me in ways I'm only beginning to understand. The house keys Daniel gave me are heavy in my purse. Physical proof that my life has fundamentally changed in the span of 2 days, from learning I was adopted to inheriting property that connects me to family I never knew existed. Mom and Dad followed me back to my apartment, and now we're sitting in my tiny living room that suddenly feels even smaller knowing that I own a 4-bedroom house across town. But more importantly, we're talking, really talking, for the first time since Rachel's Christmas dinner explosion. We should have told you sooner, Mom says, for the 3rd time since we sat down. We kept thinking we'd find the right moment, the right way to explain, but years kept passing and it felt like the secret had taken on a life of its own. Why did you agree to keep it secret in the first place? I ask, because this is the question that's been eating at me. Why not let me grow up knowing the truth about Sarah, about Margaret, about where I really came from? Dad runs his hands through his hair, making it stick up in the way it always does when he's stressed. Your grandmother was convinced it would be better for you to feel completely secure in your place in our family. She'd seen too many adoptions where the children felt like outsiders or spent their whole lives wondering if their adoptive parents really loved them as much as biological children. But I did wonder, I say quietly. Maybe not about adoption specifically, but I always felt slightly out of step with the family rhythm, like I was missing some internal compass that the rest of you shared. Mom reaches over and takes my hand. That breaks my heart, Emma, because you were never out of step. You were just different, and being different isn't the same as not belonging. We talk for another hour about Sarah, about Margaret, about the trust fund that's been waiting for me since before I was born. And gradually, I start to understand that my adoption wasn't a series of random events, but a carefully orchestrated plan to keep me connected to my biological family while giving me the security of growing up with parents who desperately wanted a child. What do you want to do about the house? Dad asks.
It's been empty since Margaret died, but your grandmother kept it maintained through the trust fund. It's yours to live in or sell or rent, whatever feels right to you. The idea of living in Margaret's house, in the house that belonged to my great-grandmother, feels both thrilling and terrifying, like stepping into a story that I'm only now learning I've always been part of. But I also know that staying in my cramped apartment when I own a beautiful house would be false modesty, a way of denying the gift that multiple generations of women worked to preserve for me. I think I want to see it first, and then maybe I'll move in gradually, make it mine while learning about Margaret and who she was. Mom smiles for the first time since Christmas dinner. She would have loved you, Emma. You have her eyes and her stubborn streak, and her way of making people feel heard when they're talking to you. After they leave, I sit in my apartment, surrounded by the possessions that represent my life as Emma Carter, the teacher, the renter, the woman who always felt slightly uncertain about her place in the world, and I realize that while those things are still true, they're no longer the complete picture. I'm also Emma, the great-granddaughter of Margaret Carter, the inheritor of family property, the bridge between past and present that Grandma wrote about in her letter. My phone buzzes with a text from Maya. Just got off work. Can you talk now? I call her immediately and spend an hour explaining everything. The letter, the inheritance, Rachel's meltdown, Mark's disgust with his wife's cruelty, and my growing sense that maybe this upheaval was necessary. Maybe secrets that heavy were always going to explode eventually, and it's better that they exploded in a way that revealed truth rather than buried it deeper. So what now? Maya asks. How do you feel about everything? I think about it carefully, because this is the first time anyone has asked me what I want, rather than telling me what they think I should feel or do or believe about my situation. I feel like I'm finally meeting myself, and the words surprise me with their truth, like I've been living as a rough draft, and now I get to write the real version. That night, I don't spend hours staring at old family photos looking for clues I missed. Instead, I Google Margaret Carter and start learning about the woman whose blood runs in my veins, who built the trust fund that's going to change my financial future, who bought the house that's waiting for me to make it home. And for the first time since Rachel's announcement, I fall asleep feeling not lost, but found.
3 weeks later, I'm standing in the doorway of 842 Maple Street, holding the keys that Daniel gave me, and trying to work up the courage to actually step inside the house that Margaret built, the house that's been waiting 32 years for me to come home. The January air is crisp and clean, like the world has been washed fresh, and the snow that covers the front yard makes everything look peaceful, untouched by the drama that's been consuming our family since Christmas. The house is smaller than I expected from the outside, but something about the proportions feels familiar, like a half-remembered dream or a song you know the melody to but can't quite place. The windows have green shutters that match my eyes, and there's a wraparound porch with a swing that looks like it's been recently painted white, probably by whatever maintenance service Grandma hired to keep the property in good condition. Inside, the air smells like lemon oil and lavender, like someone has been caring for this place with love, even though it's been empty for 3 decades. The furniture is covered with white sheets that float like ghosts when I move through the rooms, but underneath, I can see hints of a life lived fully. Floral sofas and oak tables and bookshelves lined with volumes that someone actually read rather than just displayed for show. In what must have been Margaret's bedroom, I find a vanity table with an oval mirror that reflects my face back at me. And for the first time, I can see the resemblance to the woman in the locket. Not just in the green eyes and dark hair, but in the determined set of my jaw, the way I hold my head when I'm thinking through something difficult, the stubborn streak that Mom mentioned that connects me to a great-grandmother I never got to meet. The closet still holds some of Margaret's clothes, and I run my fingers over the fabric of a blue dress that might have been her favorite, wondering what she was like, whether she was shy or outgoing, whether she liked to cook or read or garden, whether she would have been proud of the woman I've become or disappointed that it took me 26 years to learn her name. Downstairs in the kitchen, there's a note taped to the refrigerator in Grandma's handwriting.
For Emma when she's ready. And inside the refrigerator, I find a bottle of champagne with another note, to celebrate coming home. Even in death, Grandma was still taking care of me, still making sure I knew I was wanted and loved and exactly where I belonged. My phone buzzes with a text from Dad. "How's the house exploration going, sweetie?" "Beautiful and strange and perfect," I text back, like stepping into a story I didn't know I was part of. Another text, this time from Mom. "Your father and I are making dinner Sunday if you'd like to join us. Rachel won't be there." The mention of Rachel still makes my stomach tighten, but it's different now. Not the sharp pain of betrayal, but the dull ache of mourning for a relationship that probably never existed in the first place. Rachel has been staying with her mother-in-law since Mark asked her to move out last week. Apparently, he told her he needed space to figure out whether he could stay married to someone capable of such deliberate cruelty. And Rachel's response was to double down on her resentment, claiming that everyone was taking my side against her. "I'd love to come to dinner," I text back. "Maybe I'll bring some photos of Margaret's house to show you." The truth is, I miss our family dinners. Even the awkward ones, even the ones where Rachel made cutting comments and Mark looked uncomfortable. I miss the sense of belonging somewhere, of being part of something larger than myself. And now that I know the truth about my adoption, now that I understand why the secret was kept, I can imagine sitting around that table again without feeling like an imposter. Later that afternoon, I'm in Margaret's garden, pulling weeds from flower beds that have been dormant all winter, when Maya shows up with coffee and pastries from our favorite bakery. She's been my lifeline through all of this, the one person who never wavered in believing that family is what you make it, not what you're born into. "So this is the famous inherited house," she says, looking around appreciatively. "It suits you, Emma, like it was waiting for someone exactly like you to bring it back to life." We sit on the porch swing, sharing coffee and watching neighbors walk their dogs, and for the first time in weeks, I feel completely peaceful. Not worried about what secrets might explode next, not anxious about Rachel's threats to contest the will, not guilty about accepting an inheritance I didn't even know existed. Just grateful to be here, in this moment, in this place that connects me to women who loved me before I was even born. "Have you heard anything from Rachel?" Maya asks, carefully, because she knows this is still a tender subject. "Mark texted me yesterday," I say. "Apparently, she's hired a lawyer to look into contesting the will, but he doesn't think she has a case since all the paperwork is legitimate and there's no evidence of coercion or incompetence." Maya nods thoughtfully. "And how do you feel about that?" I consider the question while watching a cardinal land on the bird feeder that Margaret probably filled with seeds decades ago. Sad, mostly. Sad that she's chosen bitterness over healing. Sad that she's willing to destroy what's left of our relationship rather than accept that love isn't a competition. The sun is starting to set, painting the sky pink and orange, and I think about how many sunsets Margaret watched from this same porch, how many evenings she spent here maybe thinking about the great-granddaughter she'd never meet, wondering if someday I'd sit exactly where I'm sitting now, trying to understand the legacy she left behind. "What's next?" Maya asks. "Are you going to move in permanently?" "Gradually," I say. "I want to learn about Margaret first, read her books and letters, understand who she was before I start making changes. But yes, eventually this will be home." That night, after Maya leaves, I stay late, walking through the house and trying to imagine what it will look like when it's truly mine, when I've added my own touches to Margaret's foundation, when the rooms are filled with my books and my laughter, and maybe someday the voices of friends who come for dinner parties and family who choose to love rather than resent. Before I leave, I write my own note and tape it to the kitchen counter. "Thank you, Margaret, for keeping a place for me in the world, for building something that would last until I was ready to claim it, for teaching me that family is both blood and choice, and that some gifts are worth waiting a lifetime to receive." Driving home to my apartment for what might be the last time, I think about Rachel alone in her mother-in-law's guest room, still carrying the poison of 26 years of jealousy, still convinced that my happiness somehow diminishes hers. And I feel something I didn't expect: forgiveness. Not for the cruelty, but for the pain that created it. For the little girl who felt displaced and forgotten, who never learned that love multiplies rather than divides when it's shared freely.
Family, I've learned, is not about who shares your blood or who raised you from birth. It's about who chooses to love you when they could choose otherwise, who stands by you when the truth is hard, who builds something lasting enough to shelter the people who come after them. Margaret chose to love a great-granddaughter she'd never meet. Grandma chose to honor a promise that protected me for decades. Mom and Dad chose to raise me as their own, even when it meant keeping difficult secrets. And now I get to choose how to honor all of that love by living fully and fearlessly in the truth of who I am. The house on Maple Street is waiting for me to come home, and for the first time in my life, I know exactly where I belong.
Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.